What's up everyone, welcome to today's video. Welcome to the Video Game Fight School channel. Thank you very much for tuning in. So today we're going to be visiting a topic that I've touched on a few times on the channel, but I think more indicators show that there is a need, or the need continues to arise more and more, that Gotham Knights would probably benefit from a demo or some kind of a beta when the game is getting closer to release. In fact, just recently, I watched the development post something just on their page, just, a little artwork showing Nightwing and the Knights, and the responses on Twitter were basically mostly negative. Now, we know Twitter has not necessarily been the kindest place to showcase Gotham Knights, because in the past few months, and I would say the past few years, there's just not necessarily been a lot of trust that's been fostered between a lot of developers and communities of gamers. Now, I also get that there are some petulant elements in terms of people providing their critique from a trollish perspective, not necessarily caring for the game, and the way they actually provide their criticism, you can tell that they will not buy Gotham Knights or they don't care to actually play the game. And then there are also others who give criticisms that are valid and concerns that are actually things that people are, thinking of. And I thought to myself, what can the developers actually do to really solidify their dream and their vision in the minds of those who may be sitting on the fence, or even those who are already on board? You see, that's one thing about video games, or that's one thing about these entertainment products, is you're appealing to your audience. And now that they've revealed the game, I think they already have a good sense of who is on board their team in terms of who wants the game and wants to play the game, and who's actually looking forward to it, say, compared to those who are unsure and those who are probably just detractors overall. Another really burning factor is, the last time I actually mentioned this, there were many of us in the community who had alternative ideas and even alternative concerns, because the game's releases in a few months, and trying to come up with a demo is going to eat into development time. And I understand this, but here's the thing, the industry has changed. In the past maybe 4 years, there were huge sweeping changes within the gaming industry, and Warner Brothers Games Montreal was not in the game at that time publishing or releasing any games. It's not necessarily their fault. They released their Arkham Origins game, and then within that they had 1 or 2 games canceled before they got the opportunity to showcase Gotham Knights to the world. In this time, so much has been happening. So many video games have come out. In fact, an entire generation of consoles was even in the works and was released by the time we were doing all of this, that it affected their development, because they had this game that they were first working to make cross-generation wise, and the game was probably not doing the work. They had to then shift their production to a new platform. With all of this, I really have to say that now is the time for them to be able to, maybe their top brass, come into a position where they have to adapt. I'll go ahead and I'll provide a very thorough example of a publisher and some of their studios that are actually in the mix of publishing very frequently, and how they've been able to adapt and actually overcome a lot of their own prior issues, which the gaming industry suffered from. They literally brought it upon themselves, but they were able to clean house for the most part. This is Ubisoft. Now, this is not just Ubisoft, but one of their studios, Massive Entertainment. This is their Swedish-based studio that's actually quite prolific in game development. They make some of the most delicious-looking video games that you will ever see in the gaming industry. It's insane. Now, why I'm bringing this up is because I'm very well aware of this game, and I've been fortunate to be part of its community. Some of you on the Video Game Fight School channel, or maybe you do not know, that I've covered another video game on a separate YouTube channel for about 6 years. This is the Tom Clancy's The Division franchise. And I remember when The Division was bringing out its sequel, the second game, in 2018, they not only announced the game at E3 of 2018, they showed up that day with gameplay. Not just gameplay that they played, but gameplay that people who were there could actually pick up the controllers and play. This was radically different, because for those of you who know, Ubisoft used to be the kings of showing you polished, beautiful gameplay, and then when you got the game, it was the downgraded, whatever it is that they thought you would probably be playing, that's what you got in your hands. Players felt like they were basically being sold an apple, and when they got the apple, somebody had taken out 6 bites from it. That used to be the way Ubisoft games were. In fact, Steam had to change their policies where if game developers and publishers were putting up pictures or putting up any kind of marketing on their Steam page, it had to be a representation of the game, or they had to indicate that this is in-game engine footage or this is just not the representation of the game, so that players were informed. I think because of those changes and those shifts in the industry, so much really did hang on developers actually putting up or shutting up. Now, keep in mind that The Division came out a month after Anthem, a game that was actually hyped, a game that we saw showcases. The developers came out and were showing all of this gameplay, telling us about these elements on the game, and Anthem came out, and behold, it was not necessarily the bill of goods that gamers were sold. This also deepens the amount of distrust that you've had between gamers and developers. What even made matters worse was CD Projekt Red, who had already built a lot of goodwill with the gaming community, went ahead and pretty much lied and discredited themselves, all in this time Gotham Knights was being developed. So when we look at the relationship and the way things have evolved, I think right now we're at a precipice where gaming is actually under much more of a strain, not necessarily because of Warner Brothers Games Montreal's fault. I think Warner Brothers Montreal is just one of those companies that finds itself in the middle of a radically changing industry and a radically changing corporate structure. So putting all of this together, this game is really in a very interesting spot. Another really interesting example will be Marvel's Avengers. When the Marvel Avengers game was actually revealed, there were promises that were made that were broken. Now, this is something where within game development, sometimes directives could change. Bosses could be pushing and pressing on developers, creative directors, game directors to carry out directives that may be anti-consumer or in a place where it's not favorable to gamers. Like in the case of Marvel's Avengers, they went ahead and nerfed the XP, and then they went ahead and added some methodology for people to be able to purchase XP, even after saying that there was not going to be any pay-to-win elements in the game when it was released. They reneged on this particular statement. Now, this also has added more to this particular fire of video games that people aren't necessarily certain of, and I think Gotham Knights is just in that place. So it could be that devs are sincerely working on a very solid game that is going to keep all of its promises, but at the end of the day, it's just one of those things where the industry has really changed and has not necessarily changed for the better. So why am I continuing to hammer down on this particular issue? There is something about trust that I strongly believe that these developers have an opportunity to build. You see, the example that I used from Tom Clancy's The Division 2 really did rebuild trust within the community. Now, I get it. Ubisoft Massive, the way they advertised their first Division game versus what they delivered were two different things. So when they were coming to deliver their second Division game, they knew they couldn't show you some kind of high-end gameplay without showing you the game, or at least putting the game in the hands of gamers so that they could see for themselves. And the honest truth was, the gameplay and the gameplay reveal were actually almost 100% similar. In fact, you could just tell that the difference was they just made some better texture improvements, gave it a cinematic look for the gameplay reveal trailer. But when you got into the game, you went to the exact same locations, you fought the same kinds of enemies, everything was on point, everything was on par. So that trust building aspect is going to be an individual thing. Each studio has the opportunity to do it. Gone are the days when any studio is going to use their old goodwill to be able to maybe ship a new game, because CD Projekt Red pretty much vaporized that concept with their Cyberpunk 2077 release on the last generation consoles. So right now, we're just in a really interesting place, and I feel like whoever is making the decisions needs to go ahead and at least explore these options available. If they come out with the nonchalant side of, well, if you don't want to play the game, don't buy it, they're really going to put themselves in a very interesting position. And I don't think it's going to be favorable for those who have really put a lot of hard work into making the game. But at the end of the day, I can only provide my own opinions. We in the community can only talk about the things that we feel are necessarily helpful for the game. And hopefully, whoever is making the decisions takes these into account and do whatever they will with it. Talk to me in the comment section. I appreciate you guys for watching the video. Thanks so much for your time and audience. Peace. Peace out.